Welcome, everyone, to our Contemplative Community Week event for the 30th of March. My name is John Radwin, and I teach in our communication program, and I'm honored to be one of the organizers for Contemplative Community Week. And I'm happy to introduce our speaker today, Professor Bryan Price. He's the director of the Buccino Leadership Institute, and he will be talking to us today about mindfulness and performance. And before he gets going, I would like to plug that this event is going on all week. So tomorrow we have our weekly meditation. And then also tomorrow, I'll be doing a presentation on mindful listening to music with Dr. Jason Tram. So I invite everyone to join us. And then, of course, if you're not able to join us, we're recording all events from Contemplative Community Week, and we encourage you to check the website. So with that said, I'm happy to turn it over now to Professor Price to teach us about mindfulness and performance.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Thanks for the opportunity to present to this esteemed audience. I look forward to share my stuff. Hopefully you can see my screen. And this has been a kind of a topic I've had the opportunity to speak to a number of different audiences, both on the athletic side and the academic side in terms of corporations. And so I want to kind of start off with a question that it's a little bit rhetorical probably, which means if you ask yourself, if you look at your phone or you look at your current computer, and I don't think anybody out there is probably rocking a flip phone right now. Or even if they have an iPhone, they're probably not using iOS 1 version. And for computers, no one out there is probably using a Microsoft 98, Windows 98 format for your computer. And so I want to give people started thinking right now about if you are going to never miss an opportunity to update your computers, ask yourself, when is the last time that you've updated your most important software? And that's kind of our mindset, our mindfulness, and it definitely influences performance. As a way of introducing myself for those that don't know me, Bryan Price, I'm the executive director of the Buccino Leadership Institute here at Seton Hall. Prior to coming to Seton Hall, I attended West Point, where I was a baseball player and had the opportunity to co-captain the team there. From that spot, I was commissioned as an aviation officer and spent 20 years as an Army officer, the first half flying helicopters, the Apache Longbow, which is the Army's premier attack helicopter, with operational experiences in Iraq and Afghanistan. And then the Army sent me to Stanford University to get a PhD in political science. And I spent the second half of my 20-year career teaching at West Point and running a place there called the Combating Terrorism Center. While there, I was able to be an assistant coach on the baseball team as well. I say that because that was my first foray into mindfulness and mindset and performance. And then in 2018, I retired from the Army as a lieutenant colonel. And I tell people, even though I didn't go to Seton Hall, I got here as fast as I could. And in 2018, we started up the Buccino Leadership Institute, which, if you don't know, is a university-wide interdisciplinary program for leadership that's 4 years, and it's for competitively selected undergraduate students. So it's a great opportunity. Now, throughout my career, whether I was playing baseball or having to testify in front of Congress or leading soldiers in an aviation air squadron troop, I feel like there's been these multiple moments in my life where I've had to perform under pressure. And I think that mindfulness and mindset is one of those tools that kind of helped me get there. So when I talk about mindset, it's important to kind of define what we're talking about here. I'm talking about this set of beliefs that kind of gives us some understanding of the world and where we fit in it, but it affects all these different components of how we think, how we feel, and how we respond. And take this picture right here of this individual that's about to go in and maybe conduct a presentation or make this pitch to these folks, and think about how mindfulness and mindset influence this individual's outcome in that scenario. Number one is, on the front side, if this individual views that engagement as a threat, as opposed to an opportunity, he's going to get in that certain mindset, and that might prevent him from preparing like he normally would. He might engage in some self-sabotage and start kind of worst-casing scenario. And then think about how mindset and mindfulness influences his performance in that presentation. I would argue that if he is viewing this as a threat, he might stumble over his words. He might start stuttering. He might start sweating. And there you're not going to deliver the best product to those individuals. And if that presentation does go south, think about how mindfulness and mindset influences response to that engagement. And so he might perceive that as a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, that he didn't think he was going to do well. He viewed it as a threat, and now he's going to view future engagements like that as a threat. So we take a look at all this. I think mindset influences how we both prepare, how we perform, and how we persevere in the face of pressure and adversity. So I'm going to briefly talk about three different obstacles or mindset obstacles that I think influences our mindset and mindfulness in a negative way. The first has to do with this thing called fixed versus growth mindset. Many of you out there might be familiar with the great work by Carol Dweck, a Stanford professor who wrote a book called Mindset, where she talked about these how we view things can influence our success in those events. And she talked about very different varied industries. She talked about parenting. She talked about sports. She talked about business. But the so what here is she identified these two different mindsets. One is fixed, one is growth. And she walks you through how this influences your performance. So people that have a fixed mindset about something, when they view the challenges associated with whatever they're interested in, they're going to avoid those challenges. They're going to fear them. Whereas a person that has a growth mindset about a particular activity is going to embrace those challenges. They know it's going to be difficult, and they're not afraid of it. Additionally, when they view those obstacles and their effort in it, as soon as a fixed mindset bumps up against those obstacles, they're going to give up easily. Whereas growth mindset people are going to persevere, they persist, and overcome. Same with criticism. Fixed mindset people fear it and avoid it. Growth mindset people seek it, and they know that it's going to make them better. And finally, fixed mindset individuals, usually when they see others succeeding, they view that as a threat, whereas a growth mindset person is going to view those as a source of inspiration and motivation. Ultimately, these two things, and Carol Dweck talks about this, and the great thing, by the way, that Carol Dweck's research showed is it's not just fixed mindset folks experience these performance plateaus and complacency, and growth mindset people have more opportunities for learning and growth and performance, but you can change your fixed mindset to a growth mindset. And I'll talk a little bit about some strategies on how to do that. The second obstacle that I usually talk to individuals about has to do with this thing called imposter syndrome. Many of you have heard it before. We see it a lot, even with our Leadership Institute students. And we'll talk a little bit about what it is and who it impacts the most. So to share this kind of story, I talk about my own struggles with this at Stanford University. My very first class, and I had just come from serving in Afghanistan for an entire year, and then I found myself in a classroom in the PhD program with 14 other individuals at Stanford University. And in my cohort, my political science PhD cohort, the individual sitting next to me started a conversation, said, hey, tell me a little bit about yourself, just making small talk. And I told him that I was in the Army. I think I was around 30 years old at the time, and that I was there to, embark on this 3-year journey to earn a PhD. And I said, well, what's your story? And he said, well, I graduated from UCLA at the age of 16. I don't know what you were doing at 16, but I was not graduating from a revered Pac-12 school. He then said, I went on to graduate from Harvard Law School at the age of 20. And then I practiced law for a couple years, and then I came here. And he was about 24 years old. And so automatically, I felt like that was the epitome of imposter syndrome at that time. What made matters worse was my boss came in and from West Point and told me that he expected me to complete my PhD in 3 years, and that I was expected to complete my PhD prior to coming to West Point. So my clock was already ticking. And you see here this kind of NRC survey from 2010, like the average time for a PhD in political science and probably some of the fields that our audience is on, it's about 6-7 years. And so automatically, I not only felt like the dumbest kid in class after talking to the kids sitting next to me, but also I felt like I couldn't do this. So I imagine everyone out there has kind of experienced imposter syndrome at some point in time, and it is a impact on your mindfulness and your mindset. This is a meme that went around during the pandemic, which many of you might have seen or relate to, but it's this feeling that, others know something that you don't. It's that feeling that you ascribe your successes not to your skills and talents, but to outside forces like luck, like the fact that you got your job because somebody was nice to you. Whereas you see other people's accomplishments and see and attribute their accomplishments to their like skills, talents, and abilities. Now, this is a prevalent problem, and we talk a lot about it in the Institute. But up to 70% of people have experienced imposter syndrome at some point in their life. And what you see here is it disproportionately affects high achievers. It disproportionately affects perfectionists. It also disproportionately affects women. So what I tell people is, even if you're one of the lucky 30% out there that has never experienced this in the past, what I will guarantee you is someone that you love is experiencing this, or people that are working underneath you are experiencing this. So you want to be attuned to it. These are kind of like the symptoms of this that I was describing earlier. It's that feeling that you feel like you're a fraud at some point. Someone's going to kind of come in and like extricate you from the office and say we made this huge mistake. What this leads to is playing small, right, and being not in a fully present moment in order to perform at your best when it matters the most. The last obstacle that I'll talk about is this thing, just self-imposed limitations in general. And I love this quote from Henry Ford that says, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. If you think you can't go get that promotion and they're going to give it to somebody else, guess what? You're right. If you think you can go compete for it and, potentially get it yourself, you're also right. Both things are true. And so what I like to do is to take a look at going back to the growth mindset that we talked about before. What I tell corporations and our students in the Buccino Leadership Institute is there's two things here. You can either grow or you can be comfortable, but you can't be both. Think about the kind of meme here that's on this inside where we talk about the comfort zone, and the further you get away from that is this, learning and growth zones. What I do here when it comes to mindfulness and mindset, I make the analogy to building your muscles and getting in shape, right? So for some of us, if you're a couch potato, sitting on the couch is in your comfort zone. If I told you to get down off of the couch and do as many push-ups as possible until you went to muscle failure, what would happen is you are putting such a load on your muscles that they are actually breaking down at the micro level. The fibers in your muscles are actually breaking apart, experiencing these little tears. But what we know is that if we give our muscles enough rest, recovery, and nutrition to kind of grow back, they actually grow back stronger than they were before. And so I think the same thing applies to mindset and mindfulness. For some of you out there that say, like, I don't have 5 minutes out of my day or 10 minutes out of my day to meditate. If you feel like you're that busy, the joke is like, you probably need 20 minutes out of your day, if that is the case. But I think I see this a lot with not only my athletes that I work with and the students that I work with, but I see it in my corporate CEOs. And this has to do with how our brains keep us safe. Going back to that kind of comfort zone thing that I was referring to earlier. Our brains are designed to keep us safe. And so our brains are constantly on the lookout for threats. So be careful about what you perceive as a threat versus what you perceive as an opportunity or challenge. And this is where these self-imposed limitations really start to get to us. If our brains want to keep us in that comfort zone and away from threats, and you add that to the fact of, you see this kind of Jeep on the right-hand side, which is caught in a rut. I imagine some of the audience on here might be around my age. And we call these things like midlife crises, right? Or we get caught in the rut of life. Well, both those two things, the fact that our brains want to keep us safe and the fact that we have a tendency sometimes to get in ruts of life, those are great recipes for being average. And I want to do a quick exercise where I'm going to kind of pull out here so you can see me. But this is an exercise I do frequently with the athletic teams that I use. And I'm hoping, and you don't have to participate at home. I see some of our, hi Mary, I see some of our people here. But if you're so willing, What I'd ask everybody to do is if you can stand up, and if you just want to put your camera on mute, you don't have to. You just need to be able to see me. What I like to do is stand up, and I want you to be in a spot where you can rotate around and not hit anything behind you. So you can kind of swing your arm and you're good to go. Okay, what I like you to do now, everybody, is I want you to stand with your feet shoulder width apart. And now that your feet are shoulder width apart, they are firmly in cement. They're not going to move for the entire duration of this exercise. So what I want you to do is I want you to extend your right arm parallel to the floor. And I want you to extend your right thumb. I want you to stare at the details of your thumb. The nail bed, the wrinkles around that knuckle. And now what I want you to do, you can look at me real quick. I want you to rotate, keeping your arm parallel with the ground. I want you to rotate around to the back very slowly and gently until you can't go any further. And then once you reach that spot where you can't go any further, I want you to look beyond your thumb and find a marker on the wall where you can memorize. Once you've memorized that spot behind your thumb on the wall, I want you to rotate back around to the front. Go ahead and slowly but surely lower your arm. And now, without moving your feet, we're going to do that whole exercise again, but this time we're going to do it with our eyes closed, and we're going to visualize doing all of that same sequence, but you're not going to move any body parts. So feet shoulder width, not moving those. We're going to close our eyes. Without moving any body parts, you're going to visualize you raising your right arm. You're going to visualize the details of that thumb again. The nail bed, the wrinkles around that knuckle. Now I want you to visualize rotating back just like you did the first time. Rotating all the way until you get to that spot where you couldn't go any further. Except this time I want you to visualize going past that spot. Maybe another 3, 4, 6 inches past that spot, and finding and identifying a new spot on the wall behind you. And once you visualize and memorize that new spot, I want you to visualize coming back around just like you did the first time until your arm's in front of you. And I want you to visualize lowering your arm. Go ahead and open your eyes. All right. Now, without moving our feet, we're going to do that same sequence one last time. So go ahead and raise your right arm. See that thumb? Maybe some of us need a manicure. I know I do. What I want you to do is I want you to rotate around to the back. And how far can you go this time? Can you exceed the spot that you went beforehand and find that new spot on the wall? And once you do, come back around to the front. Go ahead and take a seat. Mary and John deserve big props for being the, I guess, voluntold testees here. And for those of you that may not have seen them, and you can speak for yourselves, but I imagine that most people were able to exceed their initial limitation. And I want you to think about why. If you remember my first instructions in that first one was to go how far? As far as you can go. And yet, when we just talked about these self-imposed limitations that we put on ourselves, that is in physical manifestation of what just occurred. Except when I made you intentional and focused on exceeding your limitations, you were able to do so. Now, granted, that's a stupid thumb exercise. But here's the thing that's going to be rattling around in your head for the next kind of couple days probably, which is, where else are you allowing your self-imposed limitations in order to hold you back? At Seton Hall, in your professional life, in your personal life. And to me, it all starts with becoming intentional about what we want to happen. So I've done this exercise probably with thousands of people at this time. I do it with every team. I do it every time I go to a conference. And so to me, it's like you got to start with being intentional about what you want. Because what you'll find is where that focus goes, the energy flows, right? Some of you might be fans of The Secret or intentionality and those sorts of things. I'm a big believer in it, you know. Again, I think it's a powerful exercise to do. So my time remaining, I'm just going to very quickly kind of cover a couple things that I think can improve your mindfulness and mindset as it pertains to your performance. And so the first one we just did, right? No matter how old you are, where you're at in your career, I recommend being very intentional about what you want to happen. put that out to the universe. Number two is I recommend that people critically analyze what their narrative is. This is what I mean by that. Some of our personal narratives, if you had like a soundtrack that is, the story of your life, what would that be? And the big question is that soundtrack or that narrative of your life, is that helping you or is it limiting you? Is it liberating you or is it limiting you? I'll give you one quick example from my life where I experienced this, and it happened between my 8th grade year and freshman year. I was going into my freshman year of high school. My freshman year of high school, and I was a baseball player. I had just won my area's Babe Ruth MVP. I was an MVP of the entire league, and now I'm feeling all great going into my freshman year in high school. And I was hitting batting practice at my high school with my dad on a summer, just the two of us. Got super hot. We hit for about probably 2 hours, and I went in the high school because they had a soda machine to get a drink. When I'm going into the high school, I noticed that the janitor had been watching me hit. And this wasn't any normal janitor. This was probably one of the best high school athletes that our school has ever produced. And so when I walked in, I knew he was watching me. He said, "Hey, man," he's like, "Saw you hitting out there." And again, I'm the Babe Ruth MVP, right? I'm 14, 15 years old. I'm feeling great. And he says, "You're looking pretty good out there." And I was like, I felt so good to get that compliment from him. And then he says, "Well, what grade are you going into? 6th?" And here I was about to be a freshman in high school, and this guy thought I was in 6th grade. And so, I said, "No, I'm going into high school." But to me, when I think of the soundtrack of my life and the narrative that was there, that was a fork in the road, because I could have taken that feedback and as I'm always going to be the short person, I'm always going to be the smallest person on the team, and therefore, like, why pursue athletics and sports? The other route was, and this is where I talk about liberating me, it was, wow, these are the cards that I'm dealt. And I have to understand that in any situation, when I show up to a team, individuals are going to prejudge me because of my size. And therefore, I have to outwork everybody. I have to hustle. I have to work on my game in ways that others can't. So when I talk about mindfulness, and by the way, I carried that with me in academics, I carried that with me in sports, and I carried that with me in the military. Know your narrative. And I bet you for some of you out there, your narrative is limiting you. You can change it, but you got to be intentional about understanding what it is and changing it. That leads into kind of this discussion of self-talk. I work with athletes a lot and senior business leaders. Actually, right now I'm working with general officers in the military. And one of the things that we discuss with them is their self-talk. There's been plenty of studies that have been done on this where, numbers are about, I think, conservatively speaking, we have about 60,000 individual thoughts that run through our head every single day, every 24 hours. Up to 80% of those thoughts can be negative. Not necessarily negative of like you're super hard on yourself, but on the lookout for threats. Some of it can be negative toward yourself. And here's the damaging part. Up to 95% of those negative thoughts can be repetitive. So that's a lot of the same things running through your head. And I bet you can just query yourself. When you screw up, what is that inner monologue that you have? And ask yourself, is that inner monologue helping you or hurting you? What I recommend my athletes do is, you're not going to be able to go through life, Pollyannish and thinking everything is rainbows and unicorns. But I think that you can be intentional about identifying when you go negative, stopping, and then replacing that negativity with, a productive, progressive way of moving forward. But if you don't do anything, what I tell my athletes is that it like builds up like plaque over time. And so it comes a time when now it's game day and you need to perform. And who would you rather be? Would you rather be, the individual that has all this negative plaque built up, or would you rather be the person that's ready to go? My other example, I do have time to tell this story in a couple of seconds. My other example for the economists on here is self-talk is a lot like compounding interest. Now remember, compounding interest can hurt you if you are taking on loads of credit card debt. You just build up that debt over time without even thinking about it. That's negative self-talk. I think positive self-talk is like compounding interest when you invest in something. And now, without you even thinking about it, you are going to have a competitive advantage over others, but just by how you think and talk to yourself. And the last one on here, which is, sounds very cliche, but it has to do with seeing feedback as a gift. Remember, we talked about fixed mindset individuals see feedback and avoid it and are fearful of it. My recommendation is to see feedback as a gift. Channeling my inner Michael Reuter, who many of you know back in the day. This is one of his favorite phrases. I'm excited because he's going to be seeing us on April 20th at our end of year gala. But when we talk about feedback, I'll leave you with this kind of concept. One is, think of feedback either when you're giving it or receiving it like your car windshield. And the car windshield is huge, right? Because it's forward looking. It's worried about what's in front of you. Compare that to the size of your rear view mirror. It is 50 times bigger, 60 times bigger. And yet, how many of us, when we see feedback or get feedback, we are focused in the past, in the rearview mirror? My recommendation is see it as a gift. Imagine that, God gave us this big old windshield in front of us in order for us to kind of move forward and to improve our performance over time. And so I'll just leave it there. So remember, you all update your phones probably the second that Apple tells you to. I would ask you to take some time either now or in the next couple days to start updating your most important software, your mindset. For those of you that want to connect with me, I'm here at the university. I'm in Jubilee Hall. I'm probably most active on LinkedIn. So if any of this stuff pertain to you, or you like stuff on performance and mindset and mental performance, and leadership, please look me up. John, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Professor Price. This is wonderful and super organized, and I appreciate your expertise. And so I'd like to encourage everybody watching this video to remember that we have a wonderful Buccino Leadership Institute, and we also have a wonderful Contemplative Community Week going on right now. So I don't know if people on the video can see the chat, but here you go. I put the link to the schedule in the chat. And I mentioned tomorrow's events. Tomorrow we have a meditation, and we also have a presentation from myself and Dr. Jason Tram from the music program. It's called Nada Brahma, God is Sound. And so we'll be talking about 10 minutes on the philosophy of sound and then 20 minutes of meditative listening. I see a hand from Professor Lloyd. Do you have a question, Marianne?
May I ask a quick question, honoring that it's noon and I'm probably supposed to be at my 12 o'clock meeting? So maybe if you could just talk for a minute about what you do when your self-imposed limitations are actually in contrast with the feedback you're receiving. So for example, I've advised a lot of students that have heard some fixed mindsets from faculty in their tougher courses. I will not name departments and names, but they may not believe that they're limited in this class, but they're receiving feedback that this is not for them. And so how do we become good discerners about the type of feedback? I thought you were going to say with the windshield, some feedback you need to just kind of wipe away because it's rain and it's not going to help.
Yeah.
Another feedback is the cleaner under the hood of your car that's going to make it so you can see clearly. So do you want to say anything about discerning helpful feedback?
Yeah, absolutely. So like one of the things, and this is one of the recipes for dealing with imposter syndrome as well. So this is a nice fit here, is who is the person in your life giving you, like, who is your mentor giving honest feedback, right? Because in the case where the student's getting information from faculty members that this is not for them, there might be an agenda or something that, that faculty member has that, may or may not be in the best interest of that student. On the students front, so to me is like, who is that person in your life that's going to really give you the honest feedback? I usually recommend not your mom because the mom's going to tell you, oh yeah, you're great at everything. The second piece is as it pertains to people that want to have a growth mindset but are getting that fixed mindset language. I think it's helpful to kind of tweak their language like in this fashion. Instead of saying something like, I'll never be an accountant, let's say, where it's very kind of cut and dry and absolute. I'll never be an accountant. I'm not good enough to be an accountant. If you're struggling in your accounting classes, I don't think the answer to that is by flipping it and saying, I'm great at finances and I'm great at accounting. I think where the tweak is with where I encourage my leaders to do is to tweak their language as such, where it says, I currently struggle with accounting and finance, but ... with practice, with perseverance, with those sorts of things, I can eventually get it. My analogy here is, have you ever seen a newborn trying to walk at that stage where they walk and they fall down and they walk and they fall down? Carol Dweck talks about this thing called a not yet mentality. And that even though you see toddlers at different stages of development and walking, have you ever been walking around Seton Hall and seeing someone just fall down like a toddler? No, eventually get it. Right? So, go get a mentor, tweak your language, and have that not yet mentality. You can look on your CV.
Okay, so great. Thank you so much. And we're out of time right now. So again, great appreciation to Professor Price and the Buccino Leadership Institute. And everyone, please check out the rest of Contemplative Community Week here at Seton Hall University. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
John.
Bryan. Thank you, John.
Thank you.